Welcome to today's historical deep dive, where we peel back the layers of legend to understand the choices that shaped an era. Most people see the emperor, the general who swept across Europe, the man on the white horse. But what if the most audacious gamble, the true moment of transformation, happened not on a battlefield, but in the dusty, disillusioned camps of a failing foreign campaign? What if the return to glory began not with triumph, but with carefully concealed defeat? If you love immersive, real storytelling about ambition and downfall, hit like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know, allowing us to keep bringing these stories to life. Drop a comment with your favorite Napoleon quote, or the moment that shocked you most. Let's begin, and change the way you think about history. You stand in the swirling, relentless sands of Egypt. The air is thick with dust and disappointment. This campaign, launched with such fanfare and grand ambition, has stalled, become a grinding, miserable stalemate. Admiral Nelson, that implacable foe, shattered your fleet at the Nile, marooning your army. The ambitious venture into Syria crumbled under the walls of Acre, proving you were not invincible. And now, worse than any enemy charge, a silent, creeping plague haunts your ranks, decimating soldiers and morale alike. You are far from the triumphant conqueror envisioned back in Paris. Yet dispatches from France paint a picture of a different, perhaps more opportune, kind of chaos. The government you left behind, the Directory, is not merely struggling, it is collapsing, a rotten edifice crumbling under the weight of its own corruption and incompetence. France, the nation you bled for, the source of your power and legitimacy, is adrift, yearning desperately for stability, for a strong hand to guide the tiller. You, Napoleon Bonaparte, see opportunity in this decay, a vacuum waiting to be filled. You didn't return from Egypt hailed as a triumphant conqueror, sweeping away all before you. That narrative, the illusion of continued victory masking the grim reality, was carefully crafted, a masterpiece of early propaganda. You returned not as a savior, riding a white charger, but like a seasoned gambler, surveying a chaotic, unpredictable table. You recognize the precise, fleeting moment to push all your chips forward, to risk everything you've built on the battlefield for the ultimate, intoxicating prize, power itself. Others in Paris are plotting, maneuvering. Sieyès, the old revolutionary thinker, the constitution maker, seeks a sword, a military strongman, to enforce a new political order, to give teeth to his intricate designs. You, the young general, forged in the crucible of Italian campaigns and Egyptian heat, the man with a proven track record of command and an almost mythical reputation, are that sword. This wasn't a selfless return to save the Republic from foreign threats or internal strife out of pure patriotism. It was a calculated, audacious leap into the political void, recognizing that the battlefield had merely been the proving ground, the necessary prelude. True dominance in this tumultuous era wasn't solely about winning battles. It was about mastering the volatile, treacherous political arena, about being present and decisive when the old order inevitably collapses. This scene in the Egyptian dust, receiving those dispatches from the heart of French chaos, is the genesis of your pivot, the precise moment the soldier decides to become the statesman, understanding that seizing power requires not just force, but impeccable timing and an iron will to take the chance others fear. Ask yourself, is this the pragmatism of a leader, or the cold calculation of a man driven solely by ambition? What would you have done, standing marooned in the desert? Presented with the keys to a crumbling kingdom, you walk the cobblestone streets of Paris in the twilight of 1799. The air hangs heavy, not with revolutionary zeal that once crackled like summer lightning, but with the stale scent of disillusionment and decay. The tricolor flag still flies, but its vibrant red, white, and blue feel faded, a mockery of the ideals it represents. The revolutionary fervor is not just cooled, it is cold, replaced by a cynical fatigue that settles on the city like the persistent autumn mist. This is the Republic, a mere decade after the storming of the Bastille, yet it feels ancient, crumbling. The Directory, the five-man executive committee cobbled together after the Reign of Terror, sits like a decaying tooth in the mouth of the nation. You see its rot everywhere. It is a cesspool of infighting, each director vying for personal power and riches, utterly disconnected from the suffering of the people they supposedly govern. Graft is not an exception. It is the currency of the realm, greasing the palms of the powerful while the treasury lies bare. The economic reality bites sharp and cold. Your handful of assignats, the revolutionary paper money, is practically worthless, lighter than dust in your palm. Inflation rages, making bread a luxury and stability a distant dream. The very sinews of the nation are fraying. Roads outside the city, once avenues of commerce and communication, are bandit-ridden, perilous stretches where travel means risking life and limb. Internal dissent isn't just rampant, it is a hydra with many heads, sprouting anew as soon as one is struck down. The nation swings violently, nauseatingly, between extremes. On one flank, the specter of a Jacobin resurgence whispers threats of renewed terror and radical purges. On the other, the ever-present threat of royalist counter-revolution, seeking to turn back the clock, haunts the Ancien Regime loyalists and sends shivers down the spines of those who benefited from the revolution. There is no center, no stability, only a constant, exhausting lurch from one crisis to the next. This scene, this state of paralysis and decay, underscores a critical, often brutal truth of power and politics. Power abhors a vacuum. The Republic, born of such noble, world-shaking ideals, failed utterly to build stable, effective institutions. It championed liberty, fraternity, and equality in theory, but delivered corruption, chaos, and despair in practice. Its weakness was not just a problem, it was an open invitation, a glaring signal to anyone with strength and ambition that the stage was empty, ready for a strong hand to seize control. In times of such profound political instability and public disillusionment, when the grand pronouncements of liberty ring hollow against the backdrop of daily struggle and fear, the appeal of order, even authoritarian order, becomes potent, almost intoxicating. People, weary of chaos, begin to crave security above all else. They become willing to trade abstract freedoms for the promise of a stable currency, safe roads, and a government that simply works. Here lies a fundamental, often tragic reflection for any leader, any government born of revolution or reform. Neglecting the fundamental, often unglamorous needs of governance and stability, securing the economy, enforcing the law, building functional institutions, no matter how noble the initial cause, creates the very conditions for your own overthrow. You invite the strongman, the one who promises to sweep away the mess, to step onto the stage you've left empty. The Directory, focused on its internal squabbles and ideological purity tests, failed to govern. It failed to provide security, economic stability, or even basic law and order. It created the perfect storm, the ideal vacuum for a man like Napoleon, watching from afar, calculating, to step into. Was this inevitable? Or merely the consequence of spectacular, fatal incompetence? What do you think? When does the dream of liberty become overshadowed by the desperate need for order? You step ashore at Fréjus, and France erupts. The air crackles with a frenzy of adoration. You, Napoleon Bonaparte, return from Egypt, not as a general whose campaign ultimately stalled, whose fleet was annihilated at the Nile, but as a conquering hero, a scholar warrior who brought back ancient secrets and daring tales. Your bulletins, those carefully crafted epics dispatched across the Mediterranean, arrived long before the remnants of your army. They spoke of valor against overwhelming odds, of scientific breakthroughs, of discovering the very cradle of civilization. They said little of the plague, the heat, the tactical retreats, or the abandonment of your troops. This is the power of narrative, the unseen weapon you wielded with instinctual mastery. You understood that history is written not just by the victors, but by the ones who control the ink. You didn't just fight campaigns, you staged them for public consumption. Every skirmish became Thermopylae, every hardship a test of Roman virtue. You turned military expeditions into personal mythologies, weaving a tapestry of heroism and destiny with every dispatch. You walk through jubilant crowds, past cheering soldiers, sensing the palpable hope they place in you. France is adrift, reeling from internal turmoil, facing external threats. They see you, the little corporal of Italian fame, the Lion of Egypt, at least in your version, as the only man strong enough, decisive enough, to right the ship of state. This isn't just a return, it's an entrance, a performance on the grandest stage, years in the making. The strategic failures in Egypt, mere footnotes buried under the weight of 1,000 glorious words. The suffering of your men left behind. A necessary sacrifice for the greater legend. Here lies a profound insight. Leadership isn't solely about actions on the battlefield or in the council chamber. It is also about the story told, the brand meticulously built. Your charisma wasn't just personal charm. It was a calculated projection of invincibility and competence. Your control over information wasn't just censorship. It was the foundation of your ascendant power. You returned not just to a nation, but to an audience desperate for a savior, ready to believe the narrative you had so skillfully constructed. Ask yourself, standing on that shore, amidst that adulation you knew you had engineered, was this confidence or the birth of hubris? The legend was returning, and he was wearing the uniform of France's hope. The Directory is rotting from within, a five-headed hydra tearing itself apart. Corruption, incompetence, endless war. The Republic stumbles. And you, Napoleon, see your moment. You are the celebrated general, the savior from Egypt, spin aside, the man the people still cheer. Others see it too. You are summoned, discreetly, into hushed rooms far from the public eye. The air is thick with the scent of old paper, ambition, and fear. Here you meet the architects of discontent, the politicians weary of paralysis, the men who believe a new constitution, a stronger hand, is the only salvation. Foremost among them is Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, the veteran constitution maker, a man who famously asked, "What is the third estate?" and answered, "Everything." Now he asks, what is missing? He believes it is a strong executive, designed by him. He sees you as the key, the popular general who can provide the muscle, the reputation, the necessary force to pry the grip of the Directory loose. They lay out their plan like blueprints for a new republic, a coup d'état. Swift and decisive, legitimized by your name and the bayonets of loyal soldiers. They need your popularity, your military command, your willingness to step onto the political stage not as a politician, but as a force of nature. They see you as the sword to cut the knot of political stagnation. But you, Napoleon, see beyond their carefully drawn diagrams. You see Sieyès, the theorist, brilliant, but perhaps naive about the raw demands of power. He wants a system where he pulls the strings from behind a constitutional facade. He needs a strong figurehead. Yes, but one he believes he can ultimately control. He views you as a necessary, albeit unpredictable, tool. This is the cold calculus of revolution, an alliance born not of shared ideals, but mutual necessity and convergent yet ultimately opposing ambitions. They are building a door, a political structure to replace the old. They invite you to walk through it, believing you will simply occupy the role they've designed. But you understand that the man who controls the army, the man with the people's fervor, is the man who controls the door itself. You agree to their plot, not as their instrument, but as the one who will seize the instrument for yourself. It's a gamble fueled by cold calculation and boundless self-belief. Ask yourself, when forming alliances, are you truly collaborating or simply finding someone to build the cage you intend to lock them inside? This moment is not just about overthrowing the Directory. It is about Napoleon Bonaparte stepping onto the path to claiming sovereignty itself, using the very men who sought to use him. Sieyès might be sketching the Constitution, but you are already planning the coronation. You stand in the pre-dawn chill of 18 Brumaire, year 8 of the Republic. November 9th, 1799, Gregorian calendar. Paris sleeps, but in certain salons and quiet council chambers, the gears of destiny are grinding. You are here not as a general fresh from Egypt, but as a figure around whom the fragmented hopes and fears of a chaotic nation momentarily coalesce. The air isn't thick with the smoke of battle, but with the calculated whispers of conspiracy. For weeks, the plot has been meticulously laid, a complex piece of political theater disguised as constitutional procedure. The key players, Sieyès, the constitutional architect, Talleyrand, the cynical diplomat, Fouché, the omnipresent police chief, and you, the necessary military muscle, have been preparing this moment. The pretext? A Jacobin plot, a phantom menace conjured from the anxieties of a Directory weary of instability, fearful of both royalist reaction and resurgent radicalism. This fabricated threat, like a carefully aimed arrow, is aimed at the Council of Ancients, the upper house of the legislature. See how it works. The plotters don't propose a brute force takeover immediately. No, they exploit the existing legal framework. They manipulate the Council of Ancients, preying on their fears of a radical uprising that could sweep away their power and lives. Under the guise of an urgent existential threat, a decree is drafted and pushed through the ancients in a hasty early morning session. This decree invokes a rarely used article of the Constitution, granting the Council of Ancients the power to move the legislative bodies, the Ancients and the Council of 500, outside of Paris for their safety. And here is the pivot, the critical move on this first day. The decree not only orders the relocation to St. Cloud, a chateau complex outside the city, but it also appoints you, General Bonaparte, commander of all the troops in Paris and the surrounding region, explicitly tasked with ensuring the security of the legislative councils during this move. It's a perfectly legal appointment, a constitutional maneuver. On the surface, it looks like the Republic's guardians, taking necessary steps to protect its institutions from an internal threat. But the true purpose is nakedly strategic. Moving the councils isolates them. It strips away their most potent, unpredictable ally, the volatile, revolutionary populace of Paris, whose street power had dictated the course of the revolution for a decade. By moving them to St. Cloud, they are rendered vulnerable, controllable, surrounded by the military force now loyal to you. It's like removing the king from his chessboard and placing him in an open field, surrounded by your pieces. Consider the chilling genius of this first step. The coup isn't initiated with cannons in the streets, but with a decree passed in a council chamber. Power isn't seized, it's conferred, legally, under the pretext of protection. The plotters wrap their intentions in the very constitution they mean to dismantle. It's a powerful reminder that the most effective coups often don't smash institutions. They hijack them, using their own rules and procedures against themselves. This isn't brute force yet. This is legal judo, using the Republic's own weight against it. You accept the appointment, ride out, and address the troops, appealing to order, stability, and the defense of the Republic against the phantom Jacobins. The troops, weary of chaos and loyal to their victorious general, cheer. The first act of the play is complete. The stage is set, the key players are in place, the potential opposition is isolated, and the military holds the reins, all under a veneer of constitutional legality. Ask yourself, when have you seen calls for safety or order used to justify granting extraordinary powers, requiring the sidestepping of normal procedures? History on this day in 1799 offers a stark warning about how easily the language of protection can become the blueprint for control. The real power grab hasn't happened yet, but the legal framework enabling it has just been meticulously constructed. You step into the Palace of St. Cloud on the 19th of Brumaire, year 8 of the Republic. Yesterday, the councils were moved here under the pretense of a Jacobin plot. Today, the coup is meant to be finalized. You approach the Council of 500, the lower house, packed with deputies you suspect are hostile, simmering with suspicion over the events of the previous day. This isn't the battlefield, where the terrain is clear and orders are obeyed instantly. This is a different kind of chaos, a viper's nest of shifting loyalties and legalistic traps. You enter the chamber, perhaps expecting deference, or at least hesitant silence. Instead, the air crackles with fury. Shouts erupt like musket fire, but far more dangerous. Down with the dictator! Outlaw him! Outlaw him! To be declared an outlaw by the legislative body is a legal death sentence, authorizing anyone to kill you on sight without repercussion. The carefully constructed facade of legality you tried to maintain crumbles instantly. This is it. This is the moment the coup could unravel, not through armed resistance, but through a vote, a shouted legal decree. You try to speak, to explain, to justify your actions, but the words catch in your throat. The shouts overwhelm you. You stumble over your sentences, visibly flustered, pale, shaken. The legend of the unflappable general dissolves under the hostile gaze of politicians. Soldiers, witnessing your distress and fearing for your safety, or perhaps for the success of the whole enterprise, rush in, pulling you from the chamber. It's a retreat, a moment of raw, unvarnished vulnerability. Here is a stark, almost tragically ironic truth about leadership. The man who could calmly command armies through the storm of battle, who faced down empires with audacious strategy, was nearly undone by a room full of shouting politicians. He wasn't prepared for this specific fight, the battle of words, the legal maneuvering, the sheer, unpredictable hostility of a political body defending itself. This scene offers a crucial insight. Even those who seem invincible have their Achilles heel. Your brilliance might lie in planning battles, but it doesn't automatically translate to navigating the treacherous waters of political debate. This moment of near disaster highlights the absolute necessity of self-awareness in leadership. You failed here because you tried to fight a political battle with the tools of a soldier, direct confrontation, expecting obedience. The reflection is profound. Know your weaknesses. Understand the environments where you are vulnerable. True success, even for a figure as dominant as Napoleon, often requires recognizing when to step back from a fight you aren't equipped to win and relying on others whose strengths lie where yours do not. Like your brother Lucien, who remained outside and rallied the troops when you faltered within the chamber. Ask yourself, where are you vulnerable outside your comfort zone? What battles are you trying to fight solo that require a different kind of ally? Welcome to today's historical deep dive, venturing into the mind of a figure whose very name conjures images of unstoppable force and earth-shattering change, Napoleon Bonaparte. Forget the statues and the paintings for a moment. Ask yourself, what does it truly take for a man born into relative obscurity on a remote island to not just challenge, but fundamentally reshape the established world order? His journey wasn't just a series of battles. It was a relentless chess match against fate, tradition, and human limitation itself. Every move was calculated, every setback a lesson, building towards an ambition so vast it would either conquer the world or consume him entirely. This is the story of a volcano disguised as a man, erupting onto the stage of history. His rise wasn't inevitable. There were moments of profound uncertainty, periods where his career hung by a thread, fueled less by destiny and more by sheer, unyielding force of will and a capacity for seizing chaotic opportunity others recoiled from. He was an outsider who mastered the insider game, a tactical genius who understood that the real power lay not just in moving armies, but in moving minds, in projecting an aura of invincibility that became a self-fulfilling prophecy. For a time, it's a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest leverage comes not from inherited privilege, but from the relentless pursuit of a singular, burning vision. If you love immersive, real storytelling about ambition and downfall, hit like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. It allows us to keep bringing these deep dives into the lives that forged our present. Drop a comment with your favorite Napoleon quote, or the moment that shocked you most. Was it a strategic masterpiece, a political gamble, or perhaps a personal flaw? Let's begin and change the way you think about history. You stumble out of the Hall of the 500, the air thick with the stench of panic and failure. The physical assault, the clumsy attempt to outlaw you. It was a near disaster, a moment where the raw politics of the chamber almost derailed everything the bayonets had promised. Outside, the soldiers loyal to you are uneasy, murmuring, unsure what has just transpired within those chaotic walls. It was supposed to be smooth, legal, a simple transition of power wrapped in revolutionary rhetoric. Instead, it collapsed into farce and fury. Inside, your younger brother Lucien, president of the Council of the 500, is fighting a desperate, theatrical battle against the tide of opposition that just rejected you. Deputies scream for your head, for decrees against you, perhaps even for execution. The coup is dissolving in real time, threatening to become just another failed Bonapartist adventure, swallowed by the volatile politics of revolutionary France. But Lucien, though lacking your military aura, possesses a crucial element. He holds the gavel, the symbolic authority of the chamber itself, and he understands the power of performance. As the hostile deputies surge towards him, threatening violence, Lucien makes his move. He dramatically tears off his presidential toga, throws it to the ground, and declares he will resign rather than preside over the death of liberty by assassins who control the chamber. It's a masterstroke of political theater, turning his weakness, being overwhelmed by opponents, into strength, portraying himself as a besieged defender of principle. Then, the crucial appeal. He calls upon the soldiers outside, your soldiers, to enter and liberate the council from these factious assassins. Outside, the troops hear the commotion, see Lucien's desperate plea. Your own general, Murat, spurred by the need to salvage the situation and perhaps by Lucien's urgent appeal, gives the order. The grenadiers, bayonets fixed, storm the building. It is swift, brutal, and utterly decisive. Deputies scatter, leap from windows, or are simply escorted out at bayonet point. The legislative body, the very symbol of revolutionary legality the Directory purported to represent, is emptied by military force. It is not a debate, not a vote, but a physical removal. The Directory is dead, not by constitutional means, but by military intervention requested by a desperate politician and executed by loyal troops. In the immediate aftermath, a rump group of deputies who were amenable to the coup or who were quickly rounded up are assembled. Under military supervision, they quickly vote to abolish the Directory and establish a provisional consulate. You, along with Sieyès, the architect of the coup, and Ducos, a pliant figure, are named as the 3 consuls. The framework is complete. The coup, salvaged by Lucien's quick thinking and Murat's bayonets, has succeeded. Here lies the stark, often uncomfortable truth illuminated by this moment. While years of political maneuvering, public relations, and building alliances got you to the brink of power, the ultimate threshold was crossed not by decree, but by force. The political dam broke only when it was breached by military power. This act, however necessary it felt at the moment to prevent failure, irrevocably stains the legitimacy of the new regime. You didn't win the argument. You cleared the room with soldiers. It's a powerful, troubling lesson. Ultimately, in moments of foundational change, power often flows from the barrel of a gun, even if that force is applied legally by dismissing a legislative body. Ask yourself, does the necessity of a moment justify the means? Or does the method of seizing power fundamentally alter the nature of the power seized? What would you have done, standing in Lucien's place or Murat's? When the political path crumbled and only the military one remained, understand the final arbiter of power in a crisis. While political maneuvering gets you close, control of coercive force is often necessary to cross the threshold, but this act irrevocably stains the legitimacy of the new regime. It is a paradox that will echo throughout your rule. The leader who rose through popular will and military genius, ultimately relies on the army to secure his initial political power, setting a dangerous precedent for the relationship between the state and the military. And so, the dust settled on the coup of 18 Brumaire. The republic was now in the hands of a consul who understood force better than philosophy, and who had just learned, definitively, where the ultimate power truly lay when the talking stopped. It was a victory, yes, but one purchased at the cost of the very principles it often claimed to defend. Looking back across the vast panorama of Napoleon's life, the dazzling victories, the sweeping reforms, the continental empire, the crushing defeats, what is the single, most enduring lesson etched into the annals of history? Perhaps it is the double-edged nature of ambition itself. It is the fuel that propels individuals and nations to extraordinary heights, capable of reshaping the world and achieving the seemingly impossible. Yet, unbound by wisdom, unchecked by restraint, it becomes a consuming fire, leading inexorably towards overreach, isolation, and ultimately, ruin. Napoleon's story is a testament to the incredible power of a singular will, but also a chilling cautionary tale about the limits of that power in the face of reality, the limits of human endurance, the limits of resources, and the inevitable resistance of those who refuse to bend. Studying history honestly, witnessing the rise and fall of giants like Napoleon isn't just about memorizing dates or battles. It's about gaining wisdom from the choices made under immense pressure, understanding the cause and effect relationships that ripple through time, and recognizing the timeless patterns of human behavior. We see the seduction of power, the temptation to believe one is invincible, the slow erosion of empathy and caution as success mounts. History offers us a mirror, not to judge the past from our comfortable present, but to understand the enduring challenges of leadership, the complexities of human nature, and the precarious balance between striving for greatness and succumbing to hubris. His legacy remains a battleground, tyrant or visionary, destroyer or modernizer. But perhaps the truest reflection lies not in defining him, but in what his story reveals about us. Our fascination with his ambition, our debate over his methods, our analysis of his downfall, it speaks to our own wrestling with the concepts of power, achievement, and the cost of dreams pursued to their absolute extreme. What does Napoleon's rise and fall tell you about the nature of ambition in your own life, or in the world around you today? In the end, it wasn't just the armies of Europe that defeated him. It was believing he could dictate the very terms of reality itself. The air in the Tuileries Palace is thick with the dust of a decade of revolution and chaos. France is a fractured vessel, listing heavily. The Directory collapsed under its own weight, and the people crave stability, order. You, Napoleon Bonaparte, have seized this moment, leveraging military renown into political power through the Brumaire coup. You are now First Consul, ostensibly one of three, yet from the outset, the power gravitates to you like iron filings to a magnet. The Constitution, crafted swiftly, is a facade behind which your singular will begins to assert itself. This isn't just about holding the reins. It's about rebuilding the very engine of the state. The task is monumental, centralizing the tangled threads of administration, a tapestry frayed by revolutionary upheaval. Provinces become departments. Prefects appointed directly by you replace local autonomy, ensuring Paris's writ runs clear and strong throughout the nation. The finances, a ruinous mess of inflation and bankruptcy inherited from previous regimes, demand immediate, ruthless action. You establish the Bank of France, stabilize the currency, and implement efficient tax collection. Measures less glamorous than battlefield triumphs, but foundational to national recovery. Then comes the sensitive matter of the Church. A decade of state atheism and schism has alienated millions. With a pragmatic, almost cold calculation that defies revolutionary dogma, you negotiate the Concordat with Pope Pius VII. It acknowledges Catholicism as the religion of the majority, while ensuring state control over clergy appointments. It's a political masterstroke, healing a deep wound and neutralizing a significant source of internal opposition, even as it quietly subordinates spiritual authority to the state. Ask yourself, was this faith or cynical statecraft? But the most enduring achievement of this era begins its formation, the codification of French law. Imagine taking centuries of disparate regional customs, royal decrees, and revolutionary legislation, a legal wilderness, and forging a single, coherent, accessible set of laws. This is the Code Napoleon. You immerse yourself in this process, attending sessions of the Council of State, debating legal principles with experts for hours. It's here, in these quiet rooms, poring over legal minutiae, that your administrative genius shines brightest, often overshadowed by the glare of military glory. The Code establishes principles like equality before the law, for men at least, secure property rights, and the abolition of feudal privileges. It reflects your desire for clarity, order, and meritocracy, within a framework you control. It's a surprising detail for many. The conqueror, the general, finds deep satisfaction in the precise language of law. This period reveals a Napoleon less known, not the audacious gambler of Marengo or Austerlitz, but the diligent, pragmatic architect of a modern state. Legitimacy, you understand, isn't just taken, it's built, piece by painstaking piece, through effective governance and lasting institutions. The air around you grows thin with suspicion. From gilded salons, where whispers of Bourbon restoration linger, to the grimy backstreets, where old Jacobin firebrands nurse their grievances against your rising authority. Opposition constricts like a tightening net. Even within your own ranks, former brothers-in-arms like General Moreau, whose victories parallel yours, become shadows of perceived threat, their very competence an implicit challenge to your singular brilliance. You see enemies everywhere, real and imagined, a hydra regrowing heads the moment one is severed. Your response is swift, decisive, and utterly ruthless. The machinery of the state, honed to a terrifying efficiency, turns inward. Joseph Fouché, your spymaster with eyes and ears in every corner of Paris and beyond, becomes your indispensable tool. His police force is not just about catching criminals. It is about silencing whispers. Plots, some genuine, many flimsy, are meticulously uncovered, often manufactured to justify the crackdown. Dissidents find themselves on ships bound for distant islands, their voices lost in the ocean's roar. Potential rivals are sidelined, their commands dissolved, their influence neutralized through calculated arrests or forced retirements. You are systematically clearing the board, eliminating pieces that could ever hope to check your king. Then comes the chilling moment that encapsulates this darker turn, the affair of the Duke of Enghien. Living in the neutral territory of Baden, a Bourbon prince, distantly connected to royalist plotting, but largely innocent of current conspiracies, becomes a symbol. You decide he must be removed. A squadron of gendarmes crosses the border illegally, violating international law, kidnapping the Duke from his home. A hasty, secret court-martial is convened in the fortress of Vincennes. No real evidence ties him directly to a plot against your life, but you demand a verdict. Found guilty in the dead of night, he is led out to the moat and executed by firing squad before dawn. It is less an act of justice, more a brutal message carved in blood for anyone who dreams of restoring the old order or challenging the new. The sheer audacity, the blatant disregard for legal process and national sovereignty sends shockwaves across Europe. This is the hidden price of the stability you crave, the dark underbelly of the order you impose. The streets might be safe, the administration efficient, but it is achieved through pervasive surveillance, through fear, through the crushing weight of repression. Traditional legal norms, like the right to a fair trial or the inviolability of neutral borders, are disregarded when they inconvenience your power. You learn that consolidating absolute authority is not merely about winning battles or writing laws. It is about the willingness to silence dissent, to eliminate perceived threats, whether they pose a real danger or simply represent an alternative vision. The methods matter less than the outcome. Unwavering control. Ask yourself, standing on this precipice, having tasted absolute power, could you have resisted the urge to silence all opposition? The reflection is stark. The path to absolute power is paved with the suppression of liberties, each crackdown a brick laid on the road towards authoritarian control. The line between necessary security, protecting the state from genuine enemies, and the paranoid suppression of all differing voices is dangerously thin, and you have just crossed it irrevocably, casting a long, dark shadow over the brilliant edifice you are building. The stability is undeniable, but so is the silence that has fallen over France. You pace the grand salons of the Tuileries Palace. The heavy velvet drapes filter the Parisian light, a soft, almost melancholic glow falling upon the polished floors where kings once walked. You are Napoleon Bonaparte, First Consul of France for life. The revolution is quelled, order restored, and your will shapes the destiny of millions. You hold more power than any monarch in generations. Yet, a persistent, gnawing restlessness stirs within you. The Consulate, for all its authority, feels like a magnificent temporary structure built on shifting sand. It is tied entirely to you. A sudden fever, an assassin's blade, a political conspiracy, and it could all unravel. The specter of anarchy, which you wrestled into submission, still lurks in the shadows. You look out at the ancient crowns of Europe, the Habsburgs, the Bourbons, the Romanovs. Their power flows not from recent victory or popular mandate, but from blood, from centuries of unquestioned inheritance. They possess a legitimacy you crave, a deep-rooted permanence that your hard-won authority lacks. You see the titles, the lineage, as shields against the transient nature of power seized by force. You want your legacy, the France you are forging, to stand not just for your lifetime, but for generations, anchored by the same unquestionable right they claim. This isn't just about vanity. It's a calculated desire for security, a belief that a crown will somehow solidify your achievements against the volatile tides of politics and death. You convince yourself that the imperial mantle is necessary to protect the revolution's gains, to present a unified, unchallengeable front to the old regimes who still plot your downfall. The ambition has evolved. It is no longer merely to rule, but to found, to create a dynasty, a system with the deep, immovable roots of monarchy, but shaped by your own revolutionary genius. Here lies the paradox. The man who rose by shattering old forms now seeks validation by adopting the oldest form of all. The insight dawns. Ambition, even when achieving impossible heights, rarely finds peace. It morphs, seeking not just more power, but different kinds of power, forms it perceives as more legitimate, more secure, more enduring. You believe the title of emperor will grant you this permanence, mistaking a symbol for substance, a label for true security. Ask yourself, what is the ultimate goal of your own striving? Is it the achievement itself, or the recognition and perceived security that titles or status might bring? The pursuit of permanence in a world defined by change is a powerful drive, yet history whispers that sometimes the very structures built to last the longest are the most vulnerable to the winds of change you initially sought to tame. Your decision hardens. France needs an emperor. You need a crown. The air grows thick with unspoken intent. You and your most trusted confidants begin a subtle, persistent campaign, the psychological siege on the public consciousness. Whispers start, then grow louder, that the consulate, for all its strength, remains fragile, vulnerable to the whims of assassins and the ghosts of the old regime, or the fever dreams of Jacobin chaos. The state, they argue, needs more than a strong hand. It needs an anchor, a permanent fixture. It needs a dynasty. Then fate, or perhaps opportunity, intervenes. The royalist plot, led by Georges Cadoudal, is uncovered, a genuine, chilling threat aimed directly at your life. This isn't just a security breach, it's a gift wrapped in daggers. You seize it, not just to punish the conspirators, but to prove a point. This attempt on the First Consul, you declare, demonstrates the inherent instability of a republic vulnerable to such attacks. Only a hereditary system where the succession is clear and unassailable can truly safeguard France from slipping back into the abyss of Bourbon rule or revolutionary anarchy. The argument, chillingly simple, resonates with a populace weary of uncertainty. The machinery of state begins to turn with a new purpose. The Senate, hand-picked and pliable, is subtly guided, then openly directed. Its members understand the prevailing wind, the direction you are steering the ship. They deliberate, they debate performatively, and eventually they arrive at the inevitable conclusion. France needs an emperor. They propose the transition from consulate to empire, a motion presented not as your decree, but as the considered will of the nation's representatives. It is a masterclass in political theater, where the conclusion is written before the play even begins. The final act requires the illusion of popular acclaim. A plebiscite is announced, a national vote to rubber-stamp the Senate's proposal. The process is meticulously managed. Opposition is minimal, discouraged through various means, from social pressure to outright suppression. The narrative is clear. Vote yes for security, stability, and glory. Vote no for a return to bloodshed and uncertainty. The result, when it comes, is an overwhelming landslide in favor of the empire. It is presented as the thunderous roar of a united nation embracing its destiny. Yet, the deeper truth is laid bare in the meticulous control of the process. This wasn't an organic surge of popular demand. It was a carefully engineered ascent, built on exploiting fear and controlling the institutions meant to represent the people's voice. The transition to empire wasn't a collective decision arrived at through open debate. It was a political campaign orchestrated with military precision, limiting the choices presented until only one seemed viable or survivable. This period reveals a profound insight into the nature of power grabs. Leaders seeking absolute control often manufacture crises or ruthlessly exploit real ones, not just to consolidate authority, but to justify it, arguing that only their solution, their centralized power, can save the state. They limit the spectrum of perceived choices presented to the populace, framing complex situations as binary options, where their path is the only safe one. Ask yourself, what does overwhelming approval following a period of intense propaganda and suppressed dissent truly represent? Is the resounding yes the genuine chorus of popular support, or is it the quiet, unified voice born of fear and the absence of real alternatives? True consent, you realize, requires genuine options, open debate, and the freedom to choose without coercion. Be critical when the polls close and the numbers are too perfect. Sometimes, the loudest silence is the most telling answer. You stand on the precipice of an empire, not through inherited right, but through sheer will, military genius, and the chaos of revolution. Yet, you feel the cold gaze of Europe upon you. They see not the restorer of order, the brilliant administrator, the victor of Marengo, but the Corsican parvenu, the revolutionary usurper. To the ancient houses, the Bourbons, the Habsburgs, the Hohenzollerns, your power as First Consul, absolute though it is in France, lacks the deep roots, the sacred oil of legitimacy. You are a temporary phenomenon, a magnificent accident, a threat to the fundamental principle upon which their world rests, blood right. Your authority is built on popular acclamation and conquest, flimsy foundations in their eyes compared to centuries of dynastic succession. You understand this deep in your strategic core. You see that remaining merely First Consul, however powerful, leaves you vulnerable to the perpetual machinations of those who dream of restoring the old order, of reinstating Louis XVIII, of erasing the very memory of the Republic and your rise. They will never truly accept you as an equal while you represent the force that decapitated a king and overturned their established hierarchy. You lack the antique stamp of divine right, the generational narrative that lends unchallenged authority. This isn't just about ego. It's a cold, hard calculation of political survival. To secure the gains of the revolution, to protect France from endless war aimed at her dismantling, you must somehow force the old world to acknowledge you, not as a temporary strongman, but as a fixture, an equal sovereign. The path to achieving this forced recognition, this undeniable presence on the European stage, lies in adopting the ultimate symbol of the old order, the crown, the imperial title. Declaring yourself emperor isn't merely vanity. It is a strategic gambit of breathtaking audacity. It's a direct challenge, forcing the monarchies to confront a revolutionary figure cloaked in the robes of emperors. It says, "You wish for traditional legitimacy? Very well, I shall create my own tradition, my own dynasty." You are not merely appropriating their symbols. You are twisting them, imbuing them with a new meaning derived from popular will or its appearance and military might, not divine decree. It is an attempt to join their exclusive club, but crashing through the front door on your own terms, demanding recognition not because you inherited power, but because you seized it and wielded it effectively. This decision reveals a profound, perhaps tragic, insight into the nature of power and change. Leaders, even those who rise on the tide of revolution, often find themselves drawn to the traditional symbols of authority they once opposed. Is it because these symbols offer a perceived stability, a language that the old world understands, or a form of external validation that even the most self-assured leader craves? You are attempting to cement a revolutionary state by giving it a profoundly traditional head, hoping that the Emperor Napoleon is a figure the other monarchs can eventually deal with in a way they never could with the First Consul of a perpetually revolutionary republic. The tragic irony hangs heavy. The revolutionary who dismantled a monarchy now builds an empire, using the very tools of dynastic power he helped break. He seeks legitimacy from the old order by adopting its ultimate form, hoping this makes him less of a target, when in fact, it only elevates him to the ultimate rival king in their eyes. You are stepping into the established Game of Thrones, believing you can change the rules from within, but potentially binding yourself to its logic. Ask yourself, when attempting to build a new world, is it more effective to utterly discard the symbols of the past or to appropriate and redefine them? Does the quest for traditional legitimacy, even for strategic gain, inevitably entangle the revolutionary in the very conflicts and mindsets they sought to overcome? The imperial gambit is underway, a high-stakes play on the European chessboard where the piece you move is yourself, now crowned. The grand nave of Notre Dame Cathedral on December 2nd, 1804, is a theater of power, steeped in centuries of French history and religious ritual. Every eye in the vast vaulted space is fixed on you, Napoleon. The air hums with anticipation, thick with incense and the weight of expectations. You stand before the high altar, a figure seemingly sculpted by destiny, not born to the purple. Pope Pius VII is here, yes, robed in splendor, seated upon his throne, a visible link to the divine legitimacy claimed by monarchs for 1,000 years. His presence is a concession, a strategic nod to tradition that you have engineered. But his role tonight is carefully delimited, reduced from kingmaker to mere prop. The crown of Emperor of the French, a laurel wreath of gold, rests on a cushion before the altar. The moment arrives. It is the climax of everything you have fought for, schemed for, willed into existence since that young Corsican artillery officer dreamed of glory. You do not kneel. You do not wait for the Vicar of Christ to bestow his blessing and place the symbol of earthly power upon your head, as kings have done for centuries, seemingly receiving their mandate from God himself, mediated by the Church. No, you stride forward, a man taking what is his by right of conquest and ambition. Your hand reaches out, not in supplication, but in possession. You take the crown from the Pope's hands. It's a gesture that vibrates through the cathedral, a visual shockwave echoing through history. And then you place it upon your own head. This is the core of the act, the seismic shift. You crown yourself. It is the ultimate declaration. Your authority originates not from God, not from divine right, not from papal anointing, but from yourself, from your own will, your own genius, your own power. The narrative you are crafting, forcefully projecting this very instant, is that this power is affirmed by the French nation, the people you claim to represent, rather than granted by any higher power or inherited bloodline. This is the self-made man, magnified to imperial scale, rejecting the foundational myth of the old world. You then turn and crown your empress, Josephine, a poignant act of shared destiny, a nod to legitimacy by association, but only after asserting your own. This unprecedented act of self-coronation is the absolute peak of your self-made ambition, made manifest in a single, unforgettable image. You have not just become emperor. You have redefined how one becomes emperor, bypassing millennia of tradition, visually asserting that you owe your position and your power to no one but your own strength and the carefully cultivated and often manipulated will of the French people. The profound insight you grasped and exploited here is that the most powerful symbols are those that communicate the source of authority with crystal clarity. Taking the crown yourself was not just bold, it was an unprecedented act of self-empowerment, a direct counter-narrative to every crowned head in Europe. It was, in a way, a revolutionary act, disguised in imperial robes. There's a tragic irony there, isn't there? The man who rode the revolution to power now uses the most ancient of ceremonies to solidify that power, but only after stripping the ceremony of its most fundamental meaning, dependence on God or inherited lineage. Yet even in this moment of ultimate triumph, the seeds of future conflict are sown. While incredibly bold and undeniably powerful as a statement, this act also deeply alienated those who still clung to traditional notions of legitimacy. The Bourbon loyalists, the devout Catholics who saw the Pope's diminished role as an insult, and the other monarchies of Europe, who viewed your self-made throne as fundamentally illegitimate, a dangerous precedent born of regicide and revolution. This dramatic, symbolic assertion of self-made power, while cementing your image as a leader beholden only to himself and the nation, guaranteed antagonism from the old powers, making future military conflicts almost inevitable. Was the symbolic assertion of self-made power, the clear visual proof that you answered to no one above, worth the immense military cost it was sure to incur? Ask yourself, when you stood there, crown in hand, did you feel the weight of history bending to your will, or the chilling wind of isolation gathering force? You survey the map of Europe spread before you, the parchment cool beneath your fingertips. The ink on the imperial decree naming you Emperor of the French is barely dry, but its shadow is already stretching across the continent like an eclipse. You wear the crown, the ancient symbol of legitimacy, yet in the courts of kings and emperors, it's seen not as a shield, but as a gauntlet thrown at their feet. The monarchies of Europe, already deeply uneasy about the revolutionary fervor that dethroned one king and guillotined another, now behold something far more unsettling: a revolutionary emperor. This isn't just France anymore. This is you, a single man, risen from obscurity through sheer will and military genius, now claiming the mantle of Caesar. The transition from fighting a republic, an abstract concept with shifting leadership, to fighting an empire, embodied by one formidable individual, clarifies the conflict for them. This isn't merely a war of political systems. It's a dynastic struggle, a war against you and the radical system you represent. A system where legitimacy is earned on the battlefield and through popular acclamation, not inherited through divine right. Great Britain, ever the vigilant island nation, already wary of French power, sees the imperial title as the solidification of an existential threat. Austria, its ancient Habsburg pride wounded by past defeats, sees its historic dominance in Central Europe imperiled by your ascendance. Russia, under the enigmatic Tsar Alexander I, oscillates between admiration and suspicion, but ultimately aligns with those seeking to restore the old order. Sweden, too, joins the growing chorus of opposition. The pieces are falling into place with grim inevitability. They are forming the Third Coalition, a coalition united not just against France, but against you, Napoleon. You sought the crown, the imperial purple, believing it would grant you the legitimacy needed to consolidate power, to build a lasting dynasty, to finally be seen as an equal by the established powers. An emperor surely was less of a radical threat than a perpetual revolution. The irony bites deep. The act meant to provide stability and acceptance triggers the most unstable period yet. Your pursuit of absolute personal authority, your coronation in Notre Dame, with you placing the crown upon your own head, wasn't a retreat from revolutionary ideals in the eyes of Europe's monarchs. It was the ultimate personal hijacking of the revolution's power, concentrated into one terrifying figure. They couldn't tolerate a republic, but they could fight it. They couldn't ignore a revolutionary emperor who commanded legions and shattered coalitions. The shift is immediate, brutal. The ink is barely dry on your imperial decree before Europe is again engulfed in the flames of war. The coronation, a moment of immense personal triumph, instantly transforms you into the primary target, the lightning rod for the accumulated fear and resentment of the old guard. Your desire for legitimacy through the trappings of empire directly triggers a massive military response from the established powers. This wasn't a slow burn. It was an immediate, global consequence, demonstrating the profound external repercussions of actions taken to solidify internal power. The reflection is stark. The pursuit of absolute personal authority rarely happens in a vacuum. It shifts the balance of power on the continent, like a great ship suddenly changing course in a crowded harbor, compelling others to react, often with overwhelming force. Your coronation was not just a ceremony. It was a declaration of war against the principles upon which the other European states were built. You wanted a crown. You got a target painted on your back, and a continent ready to pay any price to remove it. Ask yourself, standing there with the map of Europe before you, the weight of the crown heavy on your head, and the rumble of distant cannons already echoing, was this personal aggrandizement, the fulfillment of limitless ambition, worth plunging a continent into the bloody chaos of war once more? Was the price of a crown truly measured only in gold and jewels, or in the rivers of blood yet to flow? The answer is already written on the rallying banners gathering across the Rhine, across the Channel, across the frozen plains of the East. They are coming for you. You feel the subtle shift within yourself. The crisp focus of the First Consul begins to blur at the edges. Before, seated across from your ministers, poring over budgets, legal codes, infrastructure plans, there was a sense of shared purpose, intense collaboration. You were approachable, demanding, yes, but open, at least to reasoned argument on administration. You sought the best minds, devoured their reports. But now, the air in the Tuileries Palace thickens. As emperor, the distance grows, layer by layer, gilded and guarded. You are surrounded by marshals, by courtiers whispering flatteries, by family members demanding titles and lands. The hard administrative edge softens, replaced by the constant hum of protocol, the weight of crowns, the demands of lineage you invented. Your tolerance for dissent, once grudgingly present in council meetings where you debated point by point, evaporates. A raised eyebrow is now enough to silence a room. The intense focus shifts, almost imperceptibly at first, from refining the internal workings of France, the codes, the infrastructure, the education, to the relentless, consuming task of maintaining the imperial court, positioning your relatives on foreign thrones, and most pressingly, projecting power outwards, forever outwards. The endless wars become less about securing France's borders and more about asserting Napoleon's dominance, a personal crusade now cloaked in imperial destiny. This elevated status, this absolute power you craved, reveals a tragic irony. The very qualities that propelled you, the pragmatism, the willingness to listen to experts, the intense focus on practical outcomes, begin to atrophy. The feedback loops diminish. Who dares tell the emperor his plans are flawed, his costs too high? Flattery becomes the currency of the court. You are less the tireless administrator debating logistics and more the remote figure issuing decrees. Increasingly isolated from the ground truth, cocooned in the echo chamber of unquestioning loyalty. The great danger of unchecked power you discover too late is not just to the millions governed, but to the ruler themselves, who risks losing the vital connection to the reality that forged their initial success. Ask yourself, is the man who accepts the crown still the same man who stood on the bridge at Arcole? What happens to the driven reformer when he believes his word is law? Beyond question, beyond critique, you stand at the zenith of your military power. The names echo across Europe like thunderclaps: Austerlitz, Jena, Friedland. Victory follows victory, swift and brutal. A whirlwind of strategic brilliance that reshapes the map. You aren't just winning battles, you are dismantling empires, erasing borders, and placing your brothers, your marshals, your most loyal followers on foreign thrones. The Grand Empire swells, a testament to force of will and the undeniable might of your Grande Armée. From the Iberian Peninsula to the plains of Poland, your influence is paramount. You are the undisputed master of the continent, the chess player moving kings and pawns across a board scorched by cannon fire. But look closer. Each triumph, magnificent as it is, leaves behind a trail of exhaustion and simmering resentment. The resources poured into these endless campaigns are staggering. France, the heart of your empire, is blent from men and material. The conquered nations, ruled by foreign princes, installed by your bayonets, chafing under occupation and heavy tribute. They resent the loss of their ancient lineages, their traditions, their very identity under your imposed order. Every victory doesn't just defeat an enemy army. It creates a dozen new, silent enemies waiting for their moment. You are perpetually at war, not just with hostile coalitions, but with the inherent instability of a realm built on conquest rather than consent or shared history. Your most ambitious weapon against Britain, the continental system, designed to starve the island nation into submission, paradoxically binds you even tighter to this cycle of conflict. Nations under your sway struggle without British trade. Smuggling is rampant. To enforce the blockade, you must constantly intervene, sending troops into Portugal, Holland, the Papal States. You are forced to become the economic policeman of Europe, a role that requires constant military presence and breeds deep unpopularity. The system, meant to be an economic solution, becomes a military straitjacket. Here is the tragic irony. The very strength that built your empire, military conquest and personal ambition, becomes the chains that bind you to perpetual war. You are on a treadmill of conflict, unable to step off without the entire structure collapsing. The empire requires constant pressure, constant campaigning, just to keep the lid on the boiling pot of European discontent. You built it with lightning speed, but maintaining it demands the grinding, relentless effort of Sisyphus pushing his stone uphill, day after day. The brilliance of your victories blinds many to the unsustainable nature of this structure. Ask yourself, was this boundless energy a sign of unparalleled genius, or the frantic activity of a man trapped by the consequences of his own ascent? An empire founded on force, lacking deep popular roots in its diverse territories, is not a state. It is a permanent military occupation, a state of siege requiring endless effort and conflict to prevent its inevitable collapse. The glory of vast dominion exacts the price of perpetual war, draining the very lifeblood of France and laying the groundwork for future, catastrophic overreach. You stand now, years later, on a lonely island, stripped of titles, power, and empire. The vast ocean is your only boundary, the wind your constant companion, whispering the names of battles fought and lost. This rock, St. Helena, is the final, stark stage for the man who once commanded continents. The journey from the opportunistic general seizing control of a collapsing republic to the self-crowned emperor warring across a continent ends here. Dictated by the same forces of coalition and resistance that your imperial ambition provoked. Look out at the waves. They crash with the same relentless rhythm as the alliances that ultimately broke your will. The principle is starkly clear, etched into the very stone of this island. The drive for absolute power, for a permanence that defies the natural flux of history and the will of others, is a dangerous, often self-destructive force. You sought to impose your order, your will, yourself onto the world, believing force and genius could forge an eternal structure. But history bends. It does not break to one man's command. Was the empire, in retrospect, truly necessary to consolidate the revolution's gains? Or was it, as this windswept exile suggests, the fatal expression of unchecked personal ambition, a magnificent but ultimately unsustainable structure built on the shifting sands of ego and force? The code Napoleon endures, the universal language of civil law spoken across Europe and beyond, a testament to the constructive genius you wielded as consul. It is a legacy far more permanent than any territorial gain or crown worn. Yet the empire itself is dust, a monument not to enduring order, but to the inherent limits of what force and will alone can sustain, against the collective tide of nations and the stubborn human desire for self-determination. This story isn't just about one man's meteoric rise and fall. It's a timeless epic on the corrupting influence of absolute power, the delicate balance between the yearning for order and the fight for liberty, and the eternal human drive for more. a drive that can build wonders like the Code or crash nations in ruin. Ask yourself now, in the quiet reflection of history's judgment, what if history repeated itself? What if a leader, promising stability in uncertain times, seeks absolute power, believing they alone possess the clarity and strength to know the path forward? The past doesn't just rhyme. Sometimes, if we are not vigilant, it repeats its most tragic verses, played out on different stages with different actors, but with the same script of unchecked ambition and inevitable resistance. Your own words echo across these centuries, perhaps a chilling self-prophecy. Ambition never dies in the breast of a man who has any real merit. But merit alone, when unchecked by humility, empathy, or a genuine respect for the will of others, is not enough to build an enduring peace. Only a transient, glorious, and ultimately fatal dominion. The empire you built to last 1,000 years barely survived a decade. A chilling reminder that greatness without self-awareness breeds exile, not empire. The lessons are etched in the stones of St. Helena. The great general, the brilliant administrator, the self-made emperor. Here, alone, contemplating a life lived at the highest possible speed. The rush of battles, the cheers of Paris, the plotting of enemies, all fade into a roar of the ocean. What remains is the echo of decisions made, lives impacted, a continent reshaped. The ambition that drove you to such dizzying heights also ensured this lonely final fall. It wasn't necessarily malice, but a fundamental misunderstanding of history's true engine. Not the will of one man, but the complex, often chaotic, interplay of many. The wisdom we gain from this epic isn't just about Napoleon, but about the human heart itself, the intoxicating allure of control, the self-deception that absolute power often breeds, and the simple, profound truth that nothing built purely on force can stand forever against the tide of time and the spirit of liberty. In the end, it wasn't the battlefield that defeated him. It was believing he couldn't lose.